To our amazing viewers at Infidelity Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Architect. Maxwell Riggs Donovan wasn't a man who believed in second chances. As one of Boston's most respected structural engineers, he built his reputation on precision, foresight, and an uncompromising demand for excellence. Buildings didn't get second chances. They either stood or they fell. People were no different in Riggs' worldview. On the crisp autumn morning when he received his daughter Serena's wedding invitation, Riggs was finalizing plans for the Horizon Tower, his most ambitious project to date. The 50-story masterpiece would redefine the city's skyline and cement his legacy as a visionary in his field. "Congratulations, boss," said Damon Wells, Riggs' project manager and the closest thing he had to a friend. "Your little girl's getting married. But you've got a hell of a father of the bride speech planned." Riggs' weathered face creased slightly at the corners of his mouth. Been working on it for 29 years. Though he seldom spoke of his personal life at work, Riggs had always maintained a special bond with Serena. When his son Tyler had followed in his mother Vanessa's footsteps, pursuing a career in real estate development rather than engineering, Riggs had been disappointed. But Serena had inherited his analytical mind and determination. She'd become a brilliant architect, and while they often clashed professionally, their mutual respect ran deep. That evening, Riggs arrived home to the sprawling colonial home in Brookline he'd designed himself 15 years earlier. Vanessa greeted him with a glass of bourbon, her emerald dress hugging curves that still caught his eye after 32 years of marriage. "We need to talk about the wedding," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone he'd come to recognize as trouble. "What about it?" Riggs took a slow sip, savoring the burn. "Serena wants everything perfect." Vanessa fidgeted with her pearl necklace, his anniversary gift from 3 years ago. "There's been some discussion about the reception speeches." "Discussion?" Riggs set his glass down harder than necessary. "About my speech?" Vanessa's hesitation told him everything. "She's worried you'll be too critical. You know how you can be, Riggs. Professional. Cole, professional is what paid for that necklace," Riggs replied evenly. "And I've been writing this speech since she was born." The wedding planner suggested limiting speeches to lighten the program. Tyler's toast, the maid of honor, and the best man. That's it. Riggs saw the lie in her eyes. Vanessa had never been good at deception. Something deeper was happening, but he simply nodded. "I see." That night, as Vanessa slept beside him, Riggs checked her phone. The password hadn't changed since Serena's birth year. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Dozens of messages between Vanessa and Bradford Coleman, a real estate tycoon who had been circling Riggs' professional life for years. The texts weren't just business. They were intimate, conspiratorial. One exchange caught his eye. "Vanessa, he'll make a scene if we exclude him from speaking." "Bradford, your husband has controlled the narrative long enough. It's time for a change." "Our change." Riggs placed the phone back precisely as he'd found it. He didn't confront Vanessa. That wasn't his style. Instead, he began to formulate a blueprint, not for a building, but for something far more permanent: justice. Chapter 2, The Blueprint. For 3 decades, Riggs had built his marriage on what he believed was solid ground. Now he discovered the foundation was rotten. The revelation that Bradford Coleman, a man he'd competed against professionally for years, was involved with his wife wasn't just a betrayal. It was a structural failure of catastrophic proportions. Coleman Development had always been the flashy alternative to Riggs' methodical approach. Bradford built quickly, with emphasis on luxury amenities over lasting quality. His properties commanded premium prices, but often developed problems within years. Riggs had privately referred to him as the facade for years. Now Bradford was trying to construct something with Vanessa, and, clearly, the wedding was part of their plan. The next morning, Riggs began his investigation with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to his engineering projects. He hired Thomas Klein, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion. "I don't need photos of them together," Riggs instructed. "I need to understand their blueprint. How long has this been happening? Who knows about it? And most importantly, what are they planning? Klein delivered his report within a week. The affair had been ongoing for nearly 2 years, beginning shortly after Bradford had approached Vanessa's real estate firm to market his new properties. More disturbing were the financial implications. Vanessa had been quietly siphoning money from their joint accounts into a separate one. Nearly $3 million had vanished over 18 months. Most revealing was the connection to Serena's fiancé, Alan Pierce. The young lawyer worked for Bradford's company, handling property acquisitions. Their daughter's relationship had been no coincidence. Alan had been deliberately placed in Serena's orbit at a charity function Vanessa had insisted they attend. The final blow came when Klein revealed that Tyler wasn't just aware of the affair. He was actively helping his mother and Bradford, having been promised a leadership position in a new joint venture between Coleman Development and his mother's real estate company. "And my daughter?" Riggs asked, his voice betraying no emotion. "She appears genuinely in love with Pierce," Klein answered. "But she's aware of your wife's relationship with Coleman. She's torn, but her mother has convinced her that you've been emotionally absent for years. The decision to exclude your speech was made after a family meeting you weren't invited to." Riggs nodded and paid Klein his fee plus a substantial bonus. Then he returned to his home office and opened his safe. Inside was a leather-bound journal he'd maintained for decades, a detailed record of every project, every investment, and every contingency plan. He turned to a section he'd hoped never to use, titled simply, Structural Failure Protocol. That weekend, Riggs visited his attorney, Monroe Davidson, an imposing man who'd handled his legal affairs for 20 years. "I need everything ready but nothing filed," Riggs explained. "When I give the signal, I want it all to happen simultaneously." Davidson studied the documents Riggs had prepared. "This is comprehensive. Nuclear even. Are you certain? When a structure is compromised beyond repair, controlled demolition is the only responsible option," Riggs replied. "Your wife's family has influence," Davidson warned. "The Sullivans won't take this lying down. Let them stand up, then they can fall with the rest." As Riggs left the attorney's office, his phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. "Family dinner tonight. We need to discuss the wedding seating arrangements." Riggs texted back, looking forward to it. That evening, he sat at his dining table surrounded by traitors, smiling and discussing trivial wedding details while the weight of his knowledge pressed down like a collapsing beam. Tyler boasted about a new development project. Serena avoided his eyes. Vanessa touched his hand occasionally, a performance for their children. "Dad," Serena finally said, "about the reception speeches." "Your mother mentioned it," Riggs replied calmly. "I understand." The relief on their faces disgusted him. "Really?" Tyler couldn't hide his surprise. "Of course." Riggs smiled. "It's Serena's day. Everything should be exactly as she wants." Later, as he worked in his study, Serena knocked tentatively on the door. "Dad, are you really okay with not giving a speech?" Riggs looked at his daughter, her dark hair and analytical eyes so like his own. For a moment, he considered warning her, saving her from what was coming. But he recognized the calculation behind her concern. She wasn't worried about his feelings. She was ensuring the plan would proceed smoothly. "I've always taught you that adaptation is essential in design," he said. "Sometimes the original blueprint has to change." She hugged him, misinterpreting his words as acceptance. Over her shoulder, Riggs saw Vanessa watching from the hallway, a smile of victory on her lips. That night, he made the first revisions to his own blueprint. Chapter 3, Groundwork. The 8 weeks before Serena's wedding passed in a carefully orchestrated performance. Riggs played the role of the supportive but slightly distant father, exactly as they expected. He attended tuxedo fittings, nodded approvingly at flower arrangements, and wrote a check for $175,000 to the Vermont Mountain Resort where the ceremony would take place. "That's considerably more than we discussed," Vanessa remarked when she saw the amount. "Nothing but the best for Serena," Riggs replied. "Besides, I'm not giving a speech. Consider it compensation." Behind this facade of acceptance, Riggs was laying his groundwork. He made 3 key moves. First, he invited Bradford Coleman to his office under the pretense of discussing a potential collaboration. The man arrived with the confident swagger of someone who believed he'd already won. "Riggs, didn't expect to receive your call. Thought you preferred working solo." "Times change," Riggs replied, offering his rival expensive scotch. "We're about to be connected through my daughter and your employee. Seems wise to establish a relationship." Bradford's relief was palpable. He clearly believed Riggs remained ignorant of the affair. "I've always admired your structural precision, even if I find your designs a bit conservative." Conservative builds last centuries. Flashy builds make headlines. They discussed a fictitious joint venture, with Riggs suggesting a significant investment in Coleman's newest development. Bradford left with a handshake and a promise of future discussions, completely unaware that Riggs had recorded every word and sent copies to several of Bradford's investors who had been questioning recent financial discrepancies. Second, Riggs transferred the majority of his liquid assets, nearly $30 million, into accounts that Vanessa couldn't access, protected by a complex legal structure Davidson had established. Third, and most crucial, he visited Clayton Foster, owner of the Vermont resort where Serena's wedding would take place. "The check I provided has a condition," Riggs explained, sliding a document across Foster's desk. "Payment will be released in 2 installments. Half now, half immediately after the reception begins, provided these instructions are followed precisely." Foster reviewed the document with growing concern. "Mr. Donovan, this is highly unusual. So is my situation." Riggs placed a second check on the table. This one made out personally to Foster, with more zeros than the man likely saw in a year. "Consider this a convenience fee." 2 days before the wedding, the entire family traveled to Vermont. Riggs noted how Tyler and Vanessa exchanged glances whenever they thought he wasn't looking. He observed how Alan Pierce, Serena's fiancé, deferred subtly to Bradford Coleman, who had arrived with his entourage and taken a suite near the bridal party. That night, as the rehearsal dinner concluded, Vanessa finally revealed what he'd been waiting for. "Riggs, we need to talk," she said, drawing him away from the gathering. In a quiet corner of the resort's terrace, with mountains looming in the darkness beyond, she delivered the blow they'd been planning for months. "We've all decided you shouldn't speak at the reception," she announced, her eyes showing not guilt but determination. "No one wants to hear from you. Your speeches always make people uncomfortable. Serena wants her day to be perfect." For a moment, he let genuine pain show on his face, not because of their decision, but because of the calculated cruelty behind it. This public humiliation had been designed as the first step in a larger plan. Then he nodded and said simply, "Understood." His apparent acceptance seemed to unnerve Vanessa more than any argument would have. "You're not upset? It's Serena's day," he repeated, the phrase becoming his shield. Later that night, he canceled one check, the second payment to the resort, with a single phone call. "Mr. Foster? Riggs Donovan. Implement the contingency plan we discussed. The second payment won't be coming." As he ended the call, he noticed Bradford watching him from across the lobby. Riggs raised his glass in a silent toast. Tomorrow, the demolition would begin. Chapter 4. Structural Collapse. The wedding morning dawned with perfect clarity over the Vermont mountains. Riggs stood on his suite's balcony, overlooking the manicured grounds where white chairs were arranged in precise rows. Workers were putting final touches on a floral arch where Serena would soon exchange vows with a man who was part of the conspiracy against him. At precisely 9:30 a.m., his phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Davidson, all documents filed as instructed. Sequence initiated. Riggs replied with a single word, "Proceed." He dressed meticulously in his custom-tailored tuxedo, adjusting his cufflinks, platinum, engraved with his initials, a gift from Serena on his 50th birthday. The irony wasn't lost on him. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Riggs walked Serena down the aisle, her arm trembling slightly on his. Whether from excitement or guilt, he couldn't tell. He played his part perfectly, answering her "mother and I do" when asked who gives this woman in marriage. He even managed to shake Alan's hand with convincing warmth before taking his seat beside Vanessa. "You're being very mature about all this," she whispered as the vows began. I've had time to reflect on what matters, he replied. The reception began at 3 p.m. in the resort's grand ballroom. 200 guests sipped champagne and admired the extravagant decorations. Riggs noted with professional appreciation the structural elegance of the space. Exposed beams arching overhead, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the mountain vista. Tyler gave his toast first, raising a glass to his sister with practiced charm. To Serena and Alan, may your foundation be strong. The architectural metaphor made Riggs smile thinly. His son had always been derivative. The maid of honor followed, then the best man. Riggs sat quietly, nodding at appropriate moments. Vanessa repeatedly squeezed his hand in apparent gratitude for his composure. At 4:47 p.m., exactly as the dessert course was being served, Clayton Foster entered the ballroom with 2 members of his staff. He approached the head table and whispered something to the wedding planner, whose face immediately drained of color. Serena noticed the commotion. What's happening? Within minutes, the whispers had spread throughout the room. Bradford Coleman rose from his table and approached Foster, his expression darkening as they conversed. Then Serena's phone began to ring. And ring again. She checked the screen with growing alarm. Dad, the resort manager says there's a problem with the payment. They're saying the check was canceled. All eyes turned to Riggs, who calmly sipped his champagne. Dad, the panic in Serena's voice was real now. Did you cancel the payment? Riggs set down his glass. I did. The silence that fell over the nearby tables was absolute. Why would you do that? Vanessa hissed, her composure cracking. Structural integrity, Riggs replied. When a foundation is compromised, everything built upon it eventually collapses. Foster approached their table. Mr. Donovan, we need to discuss this immediately. The resort requires full payment, or I'm afraid the reception cannot continue. Serena's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Dad, fix this. Now. I'm afraid I can't do that, Riggs said, rising to his feet. He addressed not just his daughter, but the entire stunned gathering. I won't be giving a speech today. No one wants to hear from me, after all. But actions have always spoken louder than words. He turned to Foster. I believe our agreement included a second option. Foster nodded uncomfortably. Yes, sir. If the guests wish to continue the reception, individual payment arrangements will need to be made immediately. Otherwise, we'll need to close the bar and end food service. The murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. Bradford Coleman stepped forward, his businessman's instincts taking over. I'll cover it, whatever the balance is. Foster shook his head. I'm afraid the remaining balance is substantial, Mr. Coleman. And Mr. Donovan left specific instructions that no payment from you or Mrs. Donovan would be accepted. As the chaos unfolded, Riggs walked calmly toward the exit. Serena rushed after him, grabbing his arm. Why are you ruining my wedding? Riggs looked into his daughter's eyes. Ask your mother about Bradford Coleman. Ask your fiancé who really got him his position. Ask your brother about the real estate venture they've been planning. The color drained from Serena's face. What are you talking about? The truth, Riggs replied. Something in short supply in this family lately. His phone rang. Serena's number, though she stood right before him. He showed her the screen, then declined the call. That will be the first of 34 calls you'll make to me today. I won't answer any of them. As he walked away, Bradford reached him. Donovan, you can't do this. We can work something out. We already have, Riggs replied, handing him an envelope. My attorney filed these papers an hour ago. I thought you might want a preview. Bradford opened the envelope, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he scanned the documents. These allegations are baseless. You'll never prove. I've spent my career ensuring structures don't fail. Riggs cut him off. When they do, I document exactly why. I've documented everything, Bradford. Everything. As Riggs walked out of the ballroom, Vanessa caught up to him in the lobby. Whatever you think you know. 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days, Riggs interrupted. That's how long your affair with Bradford has been going on. That's how long you've been planning to leave me once you'd secured enough of my assets. That's how long you've been poisoning our children against me. Vanessa's facade finally cracked. You've always been cold, Riggs. Calculating. Bradford makes me feel alive. Feel alive with him, then. but you'll do it without the life I built. He left her standing in the lobby, her carefully applied makeup streaking with tears of rage, not remorse. As he drove away from the resort, his phone lit up repeatedly with incoming calls from Serena, Tyler, and Vanessa. By evening, the news would reach them all. Divorce papers filed citing adultery, financial malfeasance exposed, company partnerships dissolved, and trusts revoked. The demolition had begun. Chapter 5. Controlled Demolition. The media explosion hit by morning. Riggs had spent the night in a small inn 50 miles from the resort, watching as his meticulous plan unfolded through news alerts and frantic messages from family and business associates alike. Coleman Development stocks plummet amid fraud allegations. Donovan divorce rocks Boston elite. Wedding day revelation. Riggs had expected the public attention. In fact, he'd carefully engineered it. What he hadn't anticipated was the call from Lillian Sullivan, Vanessa's mother. At 82, the Sullivan family matriarch rarely involved herself in family disputes. "You've made quite a spectacle," she said when Riggs answered. Her voice carried the crisp authority that had intimidated Boston society for decades. "I didn't start this, Lillian." "No, but you've certainly escalated it. The Sullivans have endured worse scandals than this." "This isn't about scandal," Riggs replied. "It's about consequences." There was a long pause before Lillian spoke again. "Vanessa made a terrible mistake, but destroying our entire family in response seems excessive, even for a man of your precision. Your daughter didn't make a mistake. She made a series of calculated decisions over years. So did my son. So did Serena. Serena loves you, Maxwell. She's caught between her mother and you. And she chose her side," Riggs said. "Everyone made their choices. Now they'll live with them." After ending the call, Riggs drove to a small airfield where his private plane waited. Davidson had arranged everything. The pilot asked no questions as they took off, heading not to Boston, but to Seattle, where the second phase of Riggs' plan awaited. In Seattle, Riggs checked into a hotel under an assumed name and made a call to Damon Wells, his loyal project manager. "It's all over the news," Damon said. "The office is in chaos. Implement Protocol B," Riggs instructed. "The files are in my secure server." "All of them?" Damon sounded hesitant. "Every last one. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I want everything ready by 9. While Riggs operated from the shadows, his careful planning continued to decimate the lives of those who had betrayed him. The Coleman Development fraud investigation, triggered by evidence Riggs had compiled and anonymously submitted to regulatory authorities, expanded to include Vanessa's real estate firm. Tyler, who had assumed he would simply transition to working with Bradford, found himself named as a person of interest in the investigation. Alan Pierce, Serena's new husband, was placed on administrative leave from his law firm pending an ethics inquiry after documents revealed he had deliberately pursued Serena as part of Bradford's strategy to gain leverage over Riggs. Serena herself was perhaps the least culpable, but not innocent. Messages Riggs had accessed showed she had known about her mother's affair for months. While initially disapproving, she had eventually been persuaded that her father's emotional distance justified her mother's actions. The wedding reception had ended in humiliation, with guests forced to pay for their own meals and drinks or leave. Several society photographers had captured the chaos, and the images now circulated widely online. On the third day after the wedding, Riggs finally answered a call from Serena. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, her voice raw from crying. "I didn't do this to you," Riggs replied calmly. "I merely responded to what was done to me. By ruining my wedding? By destroying Mom's business? By getting Alan suspended? By revealing the truth. Something you could have done months ago when you first learned about your mother and Bradford." The silence on the line confirmed what he already knew. "You knew," he continued. "You let me walk you down the aisle knowing what they had planned. I thought you'd be better off eventually. Mom said you were never really happy, that you just went through the motions. And that justified betrayal." Serena began to cry. "Dad, please. We can fix this. Come home. Home no longer exists, Serena. And no, this can't be fixed." As he ended the call, his phone immediately lit up with a message from Davidson. "Phase 3 ready on your command." Riggs typed back, "Execute." That evening, Vanessa Donovan received notice that all accounts connected to her had been frozen due to suspected financial improprieties. The $3 million she had diverted was now inaccessible, locked in legal proceedings that would take years to resolve. Bradford Coleman, facing investor panic and regulatory scrutiny, called an emergency press conference to deny any wrongdoing. The evidence Riggs had compiled, recordings, financial records, and intercepted communications, was delivered anonymously to every major news outlet in Boston minutes before Bradford took the podium. In Seattle, Riggs watched the implosion on television, the same way he sometimes watched controlled demolitions of obsolete structures, with professional detachment and a certain grim satisfaction in the precision of it all. Chapter 6: Aftershocks. 1 week after Serena's wedding, Riggs returned to Boston, not to his home in Brookline, but to the penthouse suite of the Horizon Hotel, one of his earliest successful projects. From this vantage point, he could see the construction site of the Horizon Tower, his legacy project, steel beams rising against the skyline. His return did not go unnoticed. Boston's elite, who had been rocked by the scandal, began taking sides. Some saw Riggs as a wronged husband who had responded with justified ruthlessness. Others considered his public demolition of his family's reputation unnecessarily cruel. Lillian Sullivan, ever the strategic matriarch, invited him to her Beacon Hill mansion. Though tempted to decline, Riggs recognized the invitation for what it was, not an attempt at reconciliation, but at damage control. The Sullivan mansion remained unchanged since his first visit there 3 decades earlier. Old money preserved in amber. Lillian received him in her study, an imposing room lined with portraits of Sullivan patriarchs dating back to colonial Boston. "You've made your point," she said without preamble, pouring him a measure of brandy from a crystal decanter. "Now it's time to contain the damage." "I disagree," Riggs replied. "The damage has only begun." Lillian's carefully maintained composure flickered. "What more could you possibly want? Bradford's company is collapsing. Vanessa is effectively bankrupt. Tyler's reputation is in tatters. Serena's marriage is already showing strain. You've won Maxwell. This isn't about winning, Lillian. It's about justice." "Justice?" She almost laughed. "This is vengeance, pure and simple. Call what you want. But it's not complete." Lillian studied him with eyes that had intimidated Boston society for decades. "What are your terms?" "I don't negotiate with conspirators. I had nothing to do with Vanessa's affair or her plans." "But you knew," Riggs countered. "Just like Serena, just like Tyler. You all knew and said nothing." For the first time, a flicker of shame crossed Lillian's aristocratic features. "I advised her against it. I told her no good would come of it. But you didn't warn me. That makes you complicit." Lillian set down her glass with a sharp click against the mahogany desk. "The Sullivans have endured for 300 years in this city because we understand when to cut our losses. Name your price to end this publicly. For the family's sake." "There is no price," Riggs replied. "No settlement. No negotiation. Then why come here at all? To make certain you understand that this isn't something you can manage or contain. Your daughter conspired to destroy everything I built. Now she'll watch as I dismantle the Sullivan legacy in return." The threat hung in the air between them. The Sullivan family holdings were extensive: real estate, investment portfolios, charitable foundations, all now potentially in Riggs' crosshairs. You would punish an entire family for one member's mistakes? Your family has already chosen sides. Riggs rose to leave. "I'm simply honoring their choice." That evening, as Riggs returned to his penthouse, he found Tyler waiting in the lobby. His son looked haggard, the polished exterior that had always come so naturally to him now visibly strained. "Dad," Tyler began, his voice breaking slightly. "We need to talk." Riggs regarded his son impassively. "My attorney handles all communications now." "I'm your son, not a business associate," Tyler protested. "You forfeited that distinction when you helped Bradford and your mother plan against me." Tyler's facade crumbled. "I made a terrible mistake. I thought it would be better for everyone. Mom seemed so unhappy, and Bradford offered me a chance to build something of my own, not just live in your shadow." And that justified betraying your father? No, Tyler admitted, tears forming. Nothing justifies what we did. But Dad, please, this has to stop. The regulatory investigation, the frozen assets, the media coverage, you've made your point. No, I haven't, Riggs replied coldly. But I will. As Tyler realized no apology would suffice, his desperation turned to anger. You're destroying lives. Not just Mom's or Bradford's, but Serena's too. My career is ruined before it even started. Actions have consequences, Riggs said simply. I taught you that from childhood. You chose your actions. Now you'll face the consequences. Riggs stepped around his son and entered the elevator. As the doors closed between them, he saw something shift in Tyler's expression. The final death of hope, replaced by the dawning realization that his father's vengeance would be absolute and uncompromising. Late that night, Riggs received a call from Monroe Davidson. Bradford Coleman tried to leave the country, the attorney informed him. The FBI intercepted him at Logan Airport based on the evidence we provided. And Vanessa? She's attempting to access emergency funds from the Sullivan family trusts. So far, unsuccessfully. Maintain surveillance, Riggs instructed. Phase 4 begins tomorrow. As he ended the call, Riggs walked to the window of his penthouse and gazed out at the city he had helped build, structure by structure. In the distance, spotlights illuminated the rising frame of the Horizon Tower, his masterpiece, designed to stand for centuries. Unlike his marriage, unlike his family, those structures have been built on false foundations, and no engineer could salvage a building once the foundation had failed. Tomorrow would bring the next calculated step in his response. Not revenge. Revenge was emotional, impulsive. This was something else entirely, a precisely engineered collapse. And like all of Riggs' projects, it would be executed with flawless precision. Chapter 7. Cornerstone Removal. Day 14 of Riggs' plan dawned with a series of coordinated actions that sent shockwaves through Boston's business and social circles. First, Donovan Engineering announced a corporate restructuring that effectively removed any project connected to either Coleman Development or Sullivan family interests. Dozens of buildings across the city suddenly lost their structural oversight, a devastating blow in an industry where relationships and reliability were paramount. Second, the Sullivan Family Foundation, the cornerstone of the family's philanthropic image, received notice that their headquarters building, which Riggs had designed and maintained at a token fee for decades, would require immediate and extensive structural reassessment at market rates. Third, and most personally devastating to Vanessa, the children's hospital wing named for her late father, which had been built largely through Riggs' connections and contributions, quietly removed the Sullivan name from its facade overnight. Riggs observed these developments from the boardroom of Donovan Engineering, where he had called an emergency meeting of his executive team. Damon Wells sat at his right hand, the only person in the company fully aware of the comprehensive nature of Riggs' plan. The market is nervous, warned Helena Frost, Riggs' chief financial officer. Our stock has dropped 12% since the wedding incident. It will recover, Riggs replied with certainty. The Sullivan family has significant influence, said Robert Lynn, head of legal affairs. We're already seeing pushback from their allies. Let them push, Riggs responded. Our foundations are solid. After the meeting dispersed, Damon remained behind. The personal cost of this. Have you considered it fully? Riggs regarded his longtime colleague. I calculated everything before I began. Even losing Serena? She's the one who stands to lose the most here. And she's the one who is always most like you. For a brief moment, something vulnerable flickered across Riggs' face. She made her choice, Damon. They all did. That afternoon, the expected meeting request came from an unexpected source. Not Vanessa, not Bradford, not even Lillian Sullivan, but from Alan Pierce, Serena's new husband. Riggs accepted the meeting, curious what approach the young lawyer would take. They met in Riggs' private office at Donovan Engineering, a minimalist space dominated by structural models and architectural drawings. Alan entered with the confidence of a man accustomed to negotiating difficult situations, but Riggs noted the shadows under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands. Mr. Donovan, thank you for seeing me. Alan began. "I think we've had a serious misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Riggs corrected calmly. "I understand perfectly that you pursued my daughter at Bradford Coleman's direction, with the explicit purpose of gaining access to my family and business." Alan's professional facade cracked slightly. "It wasn't that simple. Yes, I was initially introduced to Serena because of my connection to Coleman Development. But what happened between us was real. Is real. Real enough that you concealed your employer's affair with my wife. Real enough that you participated in excluding me from speaking at my own daughter's wedding." "I was caught in an impossible situation," Alan protested. "I love Serena. I didn't want to hurt her by revealing her mother's actions." Riggs leaned forward. "Then you should have walked away. Instead, you became complicit." "I'm here to make things right," Alan said desperately. "Serena is devastated. Her career is suffering by association. She had the least involvement in any of this, yet she's paying the heaviest price." "That's where you're wrong," Riggs replied. "I'm paying the heaviest price. I lost my wife, my children, and my trust in one coordinated betrayal." "What will it take to end this?" Alan asked finally. "Not for me. Not for Vanessa or Bradford. For Serena." Riggs studied the young man for a long moment. "There is one possibility." Hope flickered in Alan's eyes. "Anything. Divorce my daughter. Walk away completely. Return every gift, every advantage you gained through this marriage. Admit publicly that your relationship began as part of Bradford Coleman's strategy against me." The color drained from Alan's face. "You can't be serious. That would destroy Serena. No more than her participation destroyed me," Riggs interrupted. "Those are my terms. The only ones I'll offer." "She loves me," Alan said quietly. "And I love her." "Then you've both learned a valuable lesson about the cost of betrayal. Love built on deception isn't love at all. It's just another unstable structure waiting to collapse." After Alan left, Riggs received a call from Monroe Davidson. "The Sullivan matriarch is mobilizing her contacts. Several of your board members have received calls suggesting a vote of no confidence might be appropriate given recent events." "As expected," Riggs replied. "Implement Protocol D." That evening, every member of the Donovan Engineering Board received an encrypted file containing detailed evidence of their own past indiscretions. Evidence Riggs had systematically gathered over decades as insurance against exactly this type of power play. The threat was implicit but clear. Any move against Riggs would result in mutually assured destruction. By midnight, the attempted coup had been neutralized. The next morning brought news that Bradford Coleman had been formally charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. The evidence Riggs had compiled and strategically released to authorities had proven devastating. As Riggs watched the news coverage from his penthouse, his phone rang with Serena's number for the first time in days. "How could you ask Alan to divorce me?" she demanded when he answered, her voice raw with emotion. "I offered him a choice," Riggs corrected. "The same choice all of you had and squandered." "Dad, please," Serena begged, "end this. We're your family." "Family doesn't conspire against family," he replied quietly. "Family doesn't exclude family from milestone moments. Family doesn't betray family for personal gain." "I made a terrible mistake," Serena admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting Mom. I thought you wouldn't be hurt if you never knew. But I didn't know. And the fact that you all thought I wouldn't discover it shows how little you understood me." The silence stretched between them. 30 years of father-daughter history cracking under the weight of recent betrayal. "I'll never forgive you for this," Serena finally said, her voice hardening. "That's your prerogative," Riggs replied evenly. "I made the same decision about all of you 2 weeks ago." After the call ended, Riggs stood at his window watching night fall over Boston. In the distance, the skeletal structure of the Horizon Tower rose against the darkening sky, a monument to precision, to careful planning, to uncompromising standards. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of his response to betrayal. Not a restoration. Some structures couldn't be salvaged once compromised, but a complete reconstruction on his terms alone. Chapter 8. New Foundations. 3 weeks after Serena's wedding, The systematic dismantling of everything Vanessa and Bradford had built together was nearly complete. Coleman Development teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, its stock essentially worthless. Vanessa's real estate firm had lost its license pending investigation. Tyler faced potential criminal charges for his role in financial improprieties. The social fallout was equally devastating. The Sullivan family, once untouchable in Boston society, found themselves isolated as former friends and allies distanced themselves from scandal. Invitations dried up, charitable boards requested resignations. Club memberships were quietly placed under review. It was precisely the moment Riggs had calculated would come, the point of maximum leverage. On a Thursday morning, he called an unexpected press conference at the construction site of the Horizon Tower. Media outlets, hungry for the next development in what the Boston Globe had dubbed the Donovan demolition, gathered eagerly beneath the towering steel framework. Riggs approached the podium, impeccable in a bespoke suit, his silver hair catching the sunlight. The cameras captured his expression, not vengeful or triumphant, but resolute. Professional. For 35 years, he began, I've built structures designed to last generations. The integrity of these buildings depends entirely on their foundations. When a foundation is compromised, the entire structure becomes unsafe. The reporters leaned forward, sensing this was more than a corporate announcement. 3 weeks ago, the foundation of my family was revealed to be compromised beyond repair. My response has been exactly what it would be to any structural failure. Careful assessment followed by controlled demolition to prevent further damage. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. Today, I'm announcing the formation of the Donovan Integrity Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. This foundation will support 2 causes. First, engineering scholarships for students demonstrating exceptional ethical standards. Second, resources for individuals rebuilding their lives after betrayal. The announcement sent ripples through the gathered press. This was not the continued vengeance they had expected. I will no longer comment on personal matters related to my former family members, Riggs continued. Their actions and the consequences have spoken for themselves. Instead, I will focus on building something new, something with a proper foundation. As questions erupted from the journalists, Riggs simply nodded once and walked away from the podium, ignoring the shouted queries about reconciliation, forgiveness, and whether this marked the end of his campaign against the Sullivans. Back in his office, he found Damon waiting. Bold move, his project manager commented. The foundation is a masterstroke, redirects the narrative entirely. It's not about the narrative, Riggs replied. It's about legacy. Speaking of legacy, Damon hesitated. Serena came by while you were at the press conference. She left this for you. He handed Riggs a small package. Inside was the silver compass Riggs had given his daughter on her first day of architecture school, along with a note in her precise handwriting. You taught me that true north never changes, no matter how lost you become. I lost my way. We all did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll remember that I was once worthy of this compass. For a moment, something vulnerable crossed Riggs' face. Then he carefully placed the compass and note in his desk drawer. Will you reach out to her? Damon asked quietly. No, Riggs replied. Some structures can't be rebuilt. That evening, as Riggs worked late in his office, Monroe Davidson arrived with final documents requiring his signature. The divorce is complete, the attorney informed him. Vanessa receives nothing beyond what the law absolutely requires. The Sullivan family has withdrawn all attempts to influence your board. Bradford Coleman's legal team has approached us about a potential settlement to drop our civil claims. Decline, Riggs said immediately. I wanted to face the full consequences. Davidson nodded, then hesitated. There's one more thing. Your son has requested a private meeting. Not here, not at your residence, but on neutral ground. He was quite insistent. Riggs considered this unexpected development. Did he say why? Only that he has information you would want to hear directly from him. After Davidson left, Riggs stood at his office window, watching darkness fall over the city. The lights of his buildings glowed against the night sky, each structure a testament to his unwavering standards. After careful consideration, he texted Tyler, Boston Common, the bench by the Founders Monument. 8 a.m. tomorrow. The response came immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. Riggs slept little that night, reviewing the possible scenarios. Was this another trap? A desperate plea? A genuine attempt at atonement? By morning, he had prepared for every possibility. Boston Common was quiet at that early hour, mist rising from the grass as Riggs approached the designated meeting place. Tyler was already there, sitting alone on the bench, looking more like the boy Riggs remembered than the polished young businessman he had become. His son stood as he approached. Thank you for coming, Tyler said. Riggs nodded but didn't sit. You have information? Tyler took a deep breath. I do. About Bradford and Mom. About everything. He removed a flash drive from his pocket. This contains all their communications going back 3 years. Financial records. Plans. Everything they didn't want you to know. I already know everything I need to, Riggs replied. Not everything, Tyler insisted. You know they betrayed you. You know I helped them, but you don't know why. Greed, ambition, disloyalty. Riggs listed clinically. The motivations are irrelevant. It wasn't just an affair, Tyler continued desperately. They were systematically undermining your projects, creating structural inspection issues that didn't exist, spreading rumors to investors. They wanted to destroy Donovan Engineering completely, not just take your money. This was new information, and Riggs felt a cold anger rising. Explain. Bradford believed you had deliberately sabotaged his West Side Tower project 15 years ago, the one that had to be extensively redesigned after structural issues were discovered. I reported legitimate structural concerns, Riggs said firmly. The building would have been unsafe. I know that now, Tyler admitted. But Bradford convinced Mom that you had engineered the whole thing to humiliate him, that you'd been deliberately targeting his projects for years. Their relationship began as revenge against you, and it evolved into a plan to systematically dismantle everything you'd built. Riggs took this in silently, the pieces rearranging themselves in his mind. And you believe this? Tyler looked down. I wanted to believe I was protecting your legacy, not destroying it. Bradford convinced me that you had made powerful enemies who were going to bring you down. That this way, at least the family would survive with some assets intact. Why tell me this now? Because I was wrong, Tyler said simply. Because watching you these past weeks, your precision, your resolve, reminded me who you really are. Not the monster Bradford painted, but the father who taught me that integrity isn't negotiable. Riggs studied his son's face for any sign of deception and found only exhaustion and regret. This changes nothing, Riggs finally said. The betrayal remains the same, regardless of motivation. I know, Tyler replied. I don't expect forgiveness. But you deserve the truth, and I couldn't live with myself knowing I'd let their lies stand unchallenged. As Tyler turned to leave, Riggs spoke again. The structural issues in Coleman's Tower 15 years ago, they weren't my opinion. They were fact. The building would have collapsed within a decade. I believe you, Tyler said quietly. I should have all along. Riggs watched his son walk away, the flash drive heavy in his hand. He had what he needed now, the final piece of the puzzle, the underlying cause of the structural failure that had destroyed his family. It changed nothing, and yet, as he walked back through the morning mist, Riggs felt something shift within him. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps a certain completion. The blueprint of betrayal was now fully revealed. His response would remain exactly as planned. Precise. Comprehensive. Final. Chapter 9. Immovable Structure. 1 year after Serena's wedding, the Boston skyline had been permanently altered, both literally and figuratively. The Horizon Tower had been completed ahead of schedule, its innovative design winning international acclaim. Donovan Engineering had not only recovered from the scandal, but had emerged stronger, with a reputation for uncompromising integrity that attracted premium clients worldwide. In contrast, the remnants of Bradford Coleman's empire had been sold off piece by piece in bankruptcy proceedings. The man himself was serving the first year of a 12-year sentence for financial crimes, his meteoric rise and catastrophic fall already the subject of a best-selling business expose. Vanessa had retreated to a modest apartment in Providence, Rhode Island, as far from Boston society as she could manage while remaining in New England. The divorce had left her with only the legal minimum of assets, her reputation in tatters, her social standing evaporated. The Sullivan family had maintained their wealth, but lost significant influence. Lillian, now in declining health, had withdrawn from public life entirely. On a clear autumn morning exactly 1 year after the wedding debacle, Riggs stood in his penthouse office reviewing the final proposal for his next major project, a revolutionary medical research facility that would bear the Donovan name. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Donovan, there's a Ms. Serena Pierce here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Riggs paused. He hadn't spoken to his daughter since their phone conversation 11 months earlier. "Send her in." Serena entered, her steps hesitant. She looked both familiar and changed, thinner, her eyes carrying a wariness that hadn't been there before. But she also stood straighter with a determination that reminded Riggs of himself. "Thank you for seeing me," she began. "What can I do for you?" Riggs asked neutrally. Serena placed a portfolio on his desk. "I'm here professionally. My firm is bidding on the Robertson Museum expansion. I understand Donovan Engineering is consulting on structural elements." Riggs raised an eyebrow. "You're not with Pierce Architectural anymore?" "No," she replied evenly. "I started my own firm 6 months ago. Alan and I are divorced." This was news to Riggs, though he kept his expression unchanged. "I see. I'm not using the Donovan name professionally," Serena continued. "I want to succeed or fail on my own merits. But I am my father's daughter in one respect. I don't compromise on structural integrity." Riggs opened the portfolio and reviewed her proposal with a professional eye. The design was innovative, bold, yet fundamentally sound. It showed the same attention to underlying support systems that had always defined his own work. "It's good," he acknowledged. "Better than good." "Thank you." Serena maintained her professional demeanor. "That's all I came to present. I don't expect personal reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I learned the most important lesson you taught me. Foundations matter." As she turned to leave, Riggs spoke. "Tyler provided me with evidence of Bradford and your mother's true intentions. Their plan to systematically undermine my projects. Did you know about that aspect?" Serena turned back, genuine shock on her face. "No, I knew about the affair, about their financial plans. But sabotaging your buildings? Never." Riggs nodded, believing her. The Donovan Integrity Foundation is funding a scholarship program for architectural students focusing on structural engineering. The selection committee could use someone with both architectural and engineering perspective. It wasn't forgiveness. Riggs Donovan didn't believe in forgiveness for betrayal, but it was perhaps the first stone of a different kind of structure. "I'd be honored to serve on the committee," Serena replied carefully. "Professionally speaking." Professionally, Riggs agreed. "The personal remains as it is." After Serena left, Damon entered the office. "Was that my daughter's architectural proposal?" Riggs cut him off. "Quite impressive. Structurally sound." Damon nodded, understanding the subtext. "Any others?" "Any contact?" "Vanessa attempted to reach me through her attorney last month. Something about reconsidering the financial settlement. I declined. Tyler has accepted a position in Seattle with a development firm unconnected to either Coleman or Sullivan interests. We've had no direct contact since his revelation in the park." "And you're satisfied with this outcome?" Damon asked carefully. Riggs turned to the window, gazing out at the city where his buildings stood as testaments to his uncompromising standards. The horizon tower dominated the skyline, its silhouette distinctive and unmistakable. Unlike the family he had lost, these structures would endure for generations. "Satisfaction isn't relevant," he replied finally. "Identified a structural failure, implemented the appropriate response, and rebuilt what could be salvaged. The rest was unsalvageable." "Some might call that cold," Damon observed. "Some might call it precise," Riggs countered. "I can work with Serena professionally. I can acknowledge Tyler's eventual honesty. But trust, once broken, cannot be fully restored. That's not emotion, it's engineering. Later that evening, as Riggs reviewed the day's work in his penthouse, his phone chimed with a message from Serena. Committee meeting scheduled for November 15th. Professional opportunity only. Boundaries understood and respected. He replied with characteristic brevity. Confirmed. Riggs Donovan stood at his window, watching lights illuminate his buildings across the Boston skyline. Each structure represented his unwavering commitment to integrity, to building things that would stand long after the builder was gone. His family had failed that test. His work never would. The betrayal had changed him, certainly, made him harder, more vigilant. But it hadn't broken him, as they had perhaps intended. Instead, it had revealed the true structural integrity of Maxwell Riggs Donovan, a man who, when the foundations failed, didn't collapse but instead rebuilt on bedrock. Uncompromising, unyielding, immovable, just as he had always been designed to be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The First Warning. Tyler Moss had always prided himself on being prepared for anything. At 34, the former Marine turned cybersecurity consultant had built a comfortable life in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Millbrook Heights. His two-story colonial home, complete with a perfectly manicured lawn and white picket fence, was everything he dreamed of during those long nights in Afghanistan. More importantly, it was where he'd built a sanctuary for his wife Megan and their 8-year-old daughter Emma. The Ring doorbell had been Megan's idea, a practical addition after a string of package thefts in their neighborhood. Tyler had installed it himself 3 months ago, taking satisfaction in the clean wiring job and perfect camera angle. Technology was supposed to make life easier, safer. He never imagined it would become the source of their nightmare. The first incident happened on a Tuesday night in October. Tyler jolted awake at 3:17 a.m. to the familiar chime of the doorbell notification on his phone. Groggy and confused, he glanced at the screen, expecting to see a raccoon or perhaps a late-night delivery. Instead, the feed showed nothing but static, a writhing mass of digital distortion that made his eyes water. "What the hell?" he muttered, careful not to wake Megan, who was sleeping soundly beside him. He slipped out of bed and padded downstairs, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floors, old habits from his military days. Peering through the front window, he saw nothing unusual. The street was empty, bathed in the amber glow of streetlights. No cars, no people, no signs of disturbance. Tyler checked the doorbell's live feed again. Crystal clear. Whatever had triggered the alert was gone, leaving behind only questions and a lingering sense of unease. He made a mental note to check the device's sensitivity settings in the morning and return to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Something about the static bothered him. It wasn't random digital noise. There had been patterns in it, almost like shapes. Faces, maybe. Tyler shook his head, attributing the thought to his half-awake state. He'd seen enough real horrors during his 3 tours overseas. His imagination didn't need to manufacture new ones. The next morning, over coffee and Emma's chatter about her upcoming school play, Tyler mentioned the incident to Megan. His wife, a pediatric nurse with practical sensibilities, simply shrugged. "Probably just a bug flying too close to the camera," she said, buttering Emma's toast. "These smart devices glitch all the time. Remember when our Alexa started ordering dog food, even though we don't have a dog?" Tyler nodded, wanting to believe her explanation. But as a cybersecurity expert, he knew technology didn't just glitch without reason. Every system failure had a cause, whether it was hardware malfunction, software corruption, or external interference. He made another mental note to run a full diagnostic on their home network. The second incident occurred exactly 24 hours later, same time, 3:17 a.m. This time, Tyler was ready. He'd positioned his laptop on the nightstand, connected to the home security system he'd installed throughout the house. When the doorbell chimed, he was instantly alert, his military training kicking in. The Ring feed showed the same writhing static, but now Tyler was recording everything. He switched to the other cameras, the one covering the backyard, the ones monitoring the side passages, the discrete indoor cameras in the hallways. All showed normal feeds. Whatever was affecting the doorbell camera was isolated to that single device. Tyler grabbed his Sig Sauer P365 from a nightstand safe and moved through the house with practiced stealth. He'd cleared buildings in Kabul. His own home was child's play. Every room was empty, every entrance secure. Outside, the neighborhood slept peacefully. Yet the doorbell continued to show that disturbing static for exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds before returning to normal. Back in his home office, Tyler analyzed the recorded footage on his high-end workstation. Frame by frame, he studied the distortion, applying various filters and enhancement algorithms he'd learned during his cybersecurity work. What he found made his blood run cold. Hidden in the static, barely visible even with enhancement, were deliberate patterns. Not faces as he'd initially thought, but symbols. Geometric shapes that seemed to shift and change with each frame. And underneath it all, almost imperceptible, was a faint audio signature. Whispers in a frequency just below normal human hearing. Tyler had seen psychological warfare before. He'd studied techniques used by hostile intelligence agencies to break down targets mentally before physical confrontation. This had all the hallmarks of a sophisticated operation designed to create fear, paranoia, and sleep deprivation. Someone was targeting his family, and they were using advanced technology to do it. But who and why? Tyler's mind raced through possibilities. His cybersecurity work had made him enemies. Corporate espionage cases where he'd exposed insider threats, government contracts where he'd identified foreign infiltration attempts. His military service had also left him with a list of potential adversaries, though most were either dead or imprisoned. The third night, Tyler was ready with more than just observation equipment. He'd spent the day researching counter-surveillance techniques and acquiring additional hardware. Motion sensors with infrared capability were positioned around the property's perimeter. High-resolution night vision cameras with local storage were installed in strategic locations. Most importantly, he'd set up a signal analysis station that would capture and analyze any electronic emissions in the area. At 3:17 a.m., the doorbell chimed again. But this time, Tyler's enhanced surveillance system captured something the original Ring camera had missed, a brief electromagnetic signature consistent with a high-power transmitter located approximately 300 yards southeast of his house. The signal lasted exactly as long as the static distortion on his doorbell camera. Tyler smiled grimly. His unknown enemy had just made their first mistake. In trying to terrorize him with ghost stories and digital phantoms, they'd revealed themselves as flesh and blood adversaries using real-world technology. And flesh and blood adversaries could be tracked, identified, and eliminated. As dawn broke over Millbrook Heights, Tyler began planning his counterattack. He'd protected his country from enemies abroad for years. Now he would protect his family from enemies at home. And unlike his previous tours of duty, this time there would be no rules of engagement to limit his response. The war for his family's safety had begun, and Tyler Moss intended to win it. Chapter 2: Digital Hunting. The next morning, Tyler sent Megan and Emma to stay with her sister in Connecticut for a long weekend. He fabricated a story about a gas leak requiring professional inspection, hating the lie, but knowing his family's safety came first. With them gone, he could focus entirely on identifying his adversaries without risking collateral damage. Tyler's home office transformed into a military command center. Multiple monitors displayed feeds from his expanded camera network, while sophisticated signal analysis equipment hummed quietly in the corner. His military and cybersecurity contacts had provided additional resources: thermal imaging cameras, electronic countermeasures equipment, and access to various government databases that officially didn't exist. The property 300 yards southeast turned out to be a foreclosed house that had been empty for 8 months. Public records showed it belonged to a shell company registered in Delaware, a dead end designed to frustrate casual investigation. But Tyler wasn't casual, and he had resources that went well beyond public records. A call to Harvey Potter, his former military intelligence colleague, now working as a private investigator, yielded more promising information. Harvey had maintained his security clearances and connections within the intelligence community, making him invaluable for situations requiring discretion and unofficial assistance. The shell company connects to a network of holding companies owned by Dennis Stewart, Harvey reported during their secure video call. Ring any bells? Tyler's jaw tightened. Dennis Stewart. He remembered the name, though it took a moment to place it in context. 3 years ago, Tyler had been contracted by the Department of Defense to investigate a security breach at a military contractor facility. Stewart had been the facility's IT director, and Tyler's investigation had uncovered evidence of Stewart selling classified information to foreign agents. The case had ended with Stewart facing federal charges for espionage, though he'd ultimately plea bargained down to lesser charges due to prosecutorial concerns about revealing sensitive intelligence methods. Stewart had served 18 months in a minimum security facility and been released 2 years ago. Looks like someone holds a grudge, Harvey said. But this seems elaborate for simple revenge. My sources say Stewart's been busy since his release, building connections with some very unsavory people. Arms dealers, human traffickers, mercenaries. Word is he's trying to rebuild his reputation in certain circles by proving he can handle personal business professionally. Tyler processed this information. If Stewart was using Tyler's family as a demonstration of his capabilities to potential criminal clients, the situation was far more dangerous than simple revenge. Stewart needed to make an impression, which meant escalation was inevitable. There's something else, Harvey continued. Stewart's been asking questions about you through intermediaries. Your daily routine, your family schedule, your home's security measures. He's been planning this for months. That night, Tyler prepared for the 3:17 a.m. visitation with military precision. Instead of waiting in his bedroom, he positioned himself in the abandoned house's backyard, armed with night vision equipment and a range of less-than-legal surveillance devices. If Stewart or his associates were using the property as a base of operations, Tyler intended to capture them in the act. At exactly 3:15 a.m., a panel van approached the house from the rear access road. Tyler watched through his night vision scope as 2 figures emerged. A thin man matching Stewart's description and a larger companion who moved with the deliberate precision of professional muscle. They carried a sophisticated array of electronic equipment into the house. Through his directional microphone, Tyler listened as they set up their operation. Signal strength looks good. Stewart's voice was unmistakable, carrying the same arrogant tone Tyler remembered from their previous encounter. The enhanced psychological warfare protocol should really mess with his head tonight. By the time we're finished with Phase 1, he'll be jumping at shadows. What about the family? The larger man asked in a gravelly voice. They're the leverage for Phase 2. Once Moss is mentally compromised, we grab them. Nothing focuses a man's attention like his wife and daughter in immediate danger. Tyler's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about him. Stewart planned to use Megan and Emma as pawns in whatever game he was playing. The smart move would be to call in Harvey and official law enforcement. Let the system handle Stewart through proper channels. But Tyler knew how the system worked. Evidence gathered through illegal surveillance would be inadmissible. Stewart's lawyers would find procedural errors, demand warrant reviews, challenge the chain of custody. Meanwhile, Stewart would remain free to target Tyler's family. And given Stewart's connections to international criminals, he might disappear entirely before facing justice. No, Tyler had tried the official route once before, and it had only delayed Stewart's revenge by a few years. This time, he would handle the situation personally. As Stewart and his partner activated their equipment, a high-power transmitter designed to inject the disturbing static into Tyler's doorbell camera, Tyler made his decision. He circled around to the house's front entrance, using lockpicks acquired during his intelligence work to gain silent entry. The house's interior was dusty and empty except for Stewart's electronic equipment. Tyler moved through the darkness like a ghost, his military training making him virtually invisible even to trained observers. He positioned himself in the hallway leading to the room where Stewart was working, close enough to hear every word but still concealed in shadow. Phase 2 begins tomorrow night, Stewart was explaining to his companion. We grabbed the family during their normal evening routine. Moss will do anything to get them back, including transferring his entire bank account to our offshore accounts. After that, we eliminate all 3 of them and make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. Tyler had heard enough. He activated a small device Harvey had provided, a cellular signal jammer that would prevent Stewart from calling for help or triggering any remote alarms. Then he began his own psychological warfare campaign. The first indication Stewart had that something was wrong came when his equipment began malfunctioning. Tyler, working from his cybersecurity expertise, had identified the transmitter's control frequency and was now flooding it with interference from a compact device he'd positioned outside. "What the hell?" Stewart muttered, frantically adjusting controls as his carefully calibrated system descended into chaos. Tyler's voice emerged from the darkness, calm and controlled. "Hello, Dennis. I think it's time we had a talk." Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. Stewart spun around, his face pale in the glow of his malfunctioning equipment. His companion, a thick-set man with prison tattoos covering his neck, immediately reached for a pistol holstered beneath his jacket. Tyler's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't recommend that, Marcus." Tyler had identified the man through facial recognition software. Marcus Vale, a former enforcer for organized crime families who'd served time for assault and battery. "I have a rifle train on you through the window, and my finger's getting itchy." It was a bluff, but Marcus hesitated long enough for Tyler to capitalize on the psychological advantage. In the darkness, the 2 men couldn't see Tyler clearly, couldn't assess his position or capabilities. Fear of the unknown was always more powerful than fear of the visible. "Tyler Moss," Stewart said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "I was hoping we'd get a chance to catch up. You cost me everything 3 years ago. My career, my reputation, my freedom. I've been looking forward to returning the favor." "Your choices cost you everything," Tyler replied, stepping partially into the light so the 2 men could see his face but not his full position. "I just documented them. But I'm curious about something, Dennis. Why the elaborate psychological warfare? Why not just come to me directly?" Stewart's laugh was bitter and humorless. "Because I wanted you to understand what helplessness feels like. I wanted you to experience the slow dissolution of everything you thought was secure, just like I did. Fear, paranoia, the gradual realization that you can't protect what matters most. That was just the beginning. And now my clients get to see how I handle personal business. Your family's disappearance will be very public, very mysterious, and very permanent. The kind of demonstration that builds reputation in certain circles." Tyler felt a cold fury building in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "There's just one problem with your plan, Dennis. You're not the only one who learned new skills over the past few years." Tyler activated a small remote control in his pocket. Instantly, the house's electrical system came to life. Not the standard power grid, but an emergency lighting system Tyler had installed earlier that day during his reconnaissance. Brilliant LED arrays flooded the room with blinding white light, destroying the 2 men's night vision advantage while leaving Tyler, who'd been expecting the activation, largely unaffected. Marcus, blinded and disoriented, pulled his weapon anyway. It was the last mistake he'd ever make. Tyler's years of combat training took over, and he moved with lethal efficiency. A throwing knife, one of several concealed on his person, caught Marcus in the throat before the larger man could acquire a target. Stewart, seeing his hired muscle collapse in a pool of blood, began backing toward the rear door. "You can't kill me, Moss. I have associates who know where I am. If I don't check in." "You mean Carlos Mendez and the Arroyo cartel?" Tyler's voice was conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Or perhaps the Bratva connections you've been cultivating through Viktor Kozlov. I've been busy too, Dennis. Your associates are going to have a very bad week." Stewart's face went white. "That's impossible. you can't know about. I know everything about your operation. The offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The safe house in Montreal. The weapons cache you've been building in preparation for your demonstration. I know about Linda Maddox, too. The mention of Linda's name hit Stewart like a physical blow. She was his inside contact at Ring's technical support division, the one who'd been providing him with detailed information about Tyler's home security system. Stewart had thought that connection was completely secure. Linda's been very helpful, Tyler continued, especially after I explained to her what you were really planning with the information she'd been providing. Corporate espionage is one thing, but accessories to kidnapping and murder? That carries a very different sentence. Stewart was now pressed against the wall, trapped between Tyler and the rear door he couldn't reach without exposing his back. What do you want, Moss? Justice. The kind that doesn't get delayed by lawyers and technicalities. You can't just execute me. You're not a vigilante. You're law enforcement. Actually, I'm retired military handling a clear and present danger to my family. The legal framework is surprisingly flexible when national security consultants encounter terrorist threats. Tyler pulled out his phone and showed Stewart the screen. It displayed a recording of Stewart's earlier conversation about kidnapping Megan and Emma. This constitutes a credible threat against civilians by an individual with established connections to international criminal organizations. The Patriot Act provides considerable latitude for response to such threats. Stewart's legs seemed to give out, and he slid down the wall into a sitting position. Jesus Christ, Moss. What did you become? Exactly what I needed to become to protect my family. For the next hour, Tyler methodically extracted information from Stewart about his entire operation. The names of his contacts, the location of his resources, the details of his planned assault on Tyler's family. Stewart, faced with the choice between cooperation and immediate death, proved remarkably forthcoming. By dawn, Tyler had a complete picture of the threat against his family. Stewart's operation was larger than he'd initially believed. A network of disgruntled former military and intelligence personnel who'd turned to criminal activities after leaving government service. They'd been using Stewart's vendetta against Tyler as a testing ground for new techniques in intimidation, kidnapping, and elimination. Here's what's going to happen, Tyler told Stewart as the sun began filtering through the abandoned house's dirty windows. You're going to make some phone calls. You're going to tell your associates that the operation is canceled, that you've had a change of heart about targeting civilian families. You're going to transfer all operational funds to accounts I specify. And then you're going to disappear. And if I refuse? Tyler gestured to Marcus's corpse. Self-defense against an armed intruder. Very tragic, but perfectly legal. Of course, if you refuse my generous offer, you might suffer the same fate as your friend there. Stewart looked at the body of his hired muscle, then back at Tyler's cold, determined expression. You've changed, Moss. The man who investigated me 3 years ago wouldn't have done this. The man I was 3 years ago didn't have a family to protect. Evolution is a wonderful thing, Dennis. The question is whether you're smart enough to evolve with changing circumstances or stupid enough to become extinct. Stewart reached for his phone with shaking hands. Tyler had won the first battle, but he knew the war was far from over. Stewart's associates wouldn't simply forget about their investment in this operation, and Tyler's methods had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But as he listened to Stewart make the calls that would dismantle the immediate threat to his family, Tyler felt no regret. Some lines were meant to be crossed when everything that mattered hung in the balance. The hunter had become the hunted, but Tyler Moss was a very dangerous prey. Chapter 4. The Network Unravels. 3 days later, Tyler sat in his home office monitoring multiple intelligence feeds while Megan and Emma remained safely hidden at her sister's house. Stewart's phone calls had bought them temporary respite, but Tyler's analysis of the intercepted communications revealed a disturbing truth. Stewart's operation was just one tentacle of a larger criminal network that wouldn't simply abandon their investment because of one man's change of heart. Harvey Potter arrived that morning with intelligence that confirmed Tyler's worst fears. Stewart's dead, he announced without preamble, settling into the chair across from Tyler's desk. Found in his hotel room this morning with 2 bullets in the back of his head. Professional execution, no witnesses. Tyler felt no satisfaction at the news. Stewart's death meant his former associates had decided to eliminate loose ends rather than abandon their operation. Who found him? Hotel staff. No cameras in that section of the building. Stewart specifically requested a room in the security dead zone. His killers knew exactly where to find him and how to avoid detection. Any leads on who's running the operation now? Harvey pulled out a tablet loaded with surveillance photos and intercepted communications. Meet Oscar Berger, former NSA analyst turned freelance intelligence broker. According to my sources, he's been building a network of discharged military and intelligence personnel for hire by organized crime syndicates. Tyler studied Berger's file. The man was younger than Stewart, maybe early 30s, with the pale complexion and soft build of someone who'd spent his career behind desks rather than in field operations. But his intelligence credentials were impressive. He'd been involved in some of the NSA's most sophisticated cyber warfare programs before being quietly dismissed for policy disagreements. Berger's operation is much more sophisticated than Stewart's revenge fantasy, Harvey continued. They've been contracted by the Kozlov organization to field test new techniques for intimidating and eliminating targets in American suburbs. The idea is to develop methods that appear random or accidental, allowing for large-scale operations without attracting federal attention. And my family is their proof of concept. Exactly. Berger doesn't care about Stewart's personal vendetta. He cares about proving his methods work. That makes him more dangerous because he's not emotionally invested in the outcome. This is just business to him. Tyler leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. An enemy motivated by emotion could be manipulated, distracted, or reasoned with. An enemy motivated purely by professional considerations was far more difficult to predict or counter. What's his next move? According to intercepts, he's moving to direct action. No more psychological warfare. Berger considers that phase of the operation complete. He's bringing in a specialist team to acquire your family for leverage while simultaneously preparing to eliminate you. Tyler's blood ran cold. Timeline: 48 to 72 hours. Maybe less if he decides to accelerate the schedule after Stewart's death. Tyler stood and walked to his safe, removing additional weapons and equipment. Then we need to move first. What do you know about his operational setup? Harvey consulted his tablet. Berger's established a command center in an industrial complex about 20 miles from here. Former furniture manufacturing facility that's been empty for 2 years. He's got at least 6 operatives with military backgrounds, plus technical support staff and local contractors for surveillance and logistics. Sounds like a small army. It is, but they're expecting to fight a scared suburban dad, not someone with your background and resources. Tyler smiled grimly. Time to adjust their expectations. Over the next 12 hours, Tyler and Harvey implemented a plan that would have impressed their former intelligence colleagues. Using a combination of cyber warfare techniques and old-fashioned reconnaissance, they mapped Berger's entire operation down to individual personnel schedules and equipment inventories. The key insight came from analyzing Berger's communications patterns. The man was brilliant at technical operations, but had a critical weakness: arrogance. He consistently underestimated local law enforcement and civilian capabilities, assuming that superior technology and professional training would overwhelm any opposition. Tyler intended to use that arrogance against him. The first phase of the counterattack began at sunset. Tyler infiltrated Berger's operational perimeter using skills learned during his military service, while Harvey coordinated with selected contacts in federal law enforcement. The plan was to simultaneously destroy Berger's technical capabilities while providing evidence of his criminal activities to authorities who could act on that information legally. Tyler's infiltration revealed that Berger's setup was indeed impressive. Military-grade communications equipment, sophisticated surveillance systems, and enough firepower to outfit a small invasion force. But it also revealed a critical vulnerability. Berger's entire operation depended on centralized command and control systems that could be compromised by someone with Tyler's cybersecurity expertise. Working from a concealed position within the facility's abandoned office section, Tyler began systematically infiltrating Berger's networks. His first target was the communications system that coordinated Berger's field operatives. A few carefully crafted virus programs began corrupting data, scrambling frequencies, and introducing false information into the command structure. Within 2 hours, Berger's operation was descending into chaos. Field teams were receiving conflicting orders, surveillance systems were reporting phantom targets, and the secure communications network was broadcasting sensitive information on frequencies monitored by federal agencies. But Tyler's real masterstroke was more subtle. Using his access to Berger's systems, he planted evidence of a much larger criminal conspiracy: weapons trafficking, money laundering, connections to international terrorist organizations. All fictional, but convincing enough to trigger immediate federal intervention when combined with the legitimate evidence of Berger's planned assault on Tyler's family. By midnight, Berger's command center was surrounded by FBI tactical teams responding to what they believed was an imminent terrorist attack on civilian targets. The evidence Tyler had planted, combined with the real communications intercepts Harvey had provided to his federal contacts, painted Berger's operation as a clear national security threat requiring immediate action. Tyler watched through night vision scopes as federal agents stormed the facility. Most of Berger's operatives surrendered immediately, recognizing that resistance against overwhelming federal force would only add to their eventual sentences. But Berger himself managed to escape during the initial confusion, slipping away through a maintenance tunnel Tyler hadn't identified during his reconnaissance. "Son of a bitch is gone," Harvey reported through their secure communications link. "Federal agents are securing the facility, but Berger's in the wind." Tyler wasn't surprised. Men like Berger always had escape plans, and his intelligence background meant he knew how to disappear effectively. But Tyler also knew that a man on the run had limited options and predictable needs. "He'll try to reach his international contacts," Tyler replied. "Probably through the network of safe houses he's established for situations like this. But he'll need resources first: money, new identity documents, transportation. That means he'll have to access assets he's cached locally. Can you track him?" Tyler smiled as he monitored the data streams flowing from Berger's compromised computers. "I don't need to track him. I know exactly where he's going." During his infiltration of Berger's systems, Tyler had discovered something the man probably didn't realize he'd revealed: the location of his emergency cache. Financial records, encrypted communication logs, and surveillance footage had all pointed to a storage facility where Berger kept resources for exactly this kind of emergency. Tyler was already moving toward that location when Berger's operational command center erupted in federal law enforcement activity. This wasn't over. It was just entering the final phase. And Tyler intended to be waiting when Berger arrived to collect his escape resources. Chapter 5: The Trap Springs. The storage facility sat in an industrial district that had seen better days, surrounded by abandoned warehouses and empty lots where weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. Tyler arrived 2 hours before dawn, giving himself time to establish surveillance and prepare for Berger's inevitable arrival. Unit 247 was located in the facility's most isolated section, accessed through a service road that provided multiple escape routes. Exactly what Tyler would have chosen for a cache location. Using equipment borrowed from Harvey's private investigation arsenal, Tyler confirmed the unit contained exactly what Berger's financial records had suggested: cash, weapons, forged documents, and communication equipment necessary for a professional disappearance. Tyler positioned himself in a vacant unit directly across from Berger's cache, settling in to wait with the patience learned during countless military operations. The storage facility security was minimal. A few cameras focused on the main entrance, a part-time security guard who spent most of his shift sleeping in the office. Perfect for someone who needed to access resources without official attention. Berger arrived just before sunrise, driving a stolen sedan and moving with the nervous energy of a man whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. Tyler watched through a directional microphone as Berger worked frantically to access his emergency supplies, muttering to himself about federal incompetence and amateur local law enforcement. Should have stayed in Moscow, Berger was saying as he stuffed cash into a duffel bag. American operations are too unpredictable, too many variables. Kozlov's going to have my head for this disaster. Tyler smiled grimly. Berger's commentary was providing valuable intelligence about his organization's structure and international connections. Information that would be very useful to federal authorities, assuming Tyler decided to share it through official channels. But as Tyler listened to Berger's plans for escape and eventual revenge against everyone who had interfered with his operation, he realized that official channels might not be sufficient. Berger was already planning his next attempt on Tyler's family, discussing methods that would be even more sophisticated and harder to detect. The man had learned from this failure and intended to apply those lessons to future operations. Tyler made his decision. As Berger prepared to leave with his emergency supplies, Tyler activated a small device he'd placed near the storage unit's entrance. The device was simple, a cellular signal jammer that would prevent Berger from calling for help, combined with a remote door lock that would trap him inside the unit. Berger's first indication that something was wrong came when his cell phone lost signal just as he tried to contact his international handlers. The second indication was the sound of the storage unit door slamming shut and refusing to reopen. "Hello, Oscar." Tyler's voice came from speakers he'd positioned inside the unit earlier. "I think it's time we discussed your future career plans." Berger spun around, weapon drawn, searching for Tyler's position. But Tyler was speaking from his concealed location across the facility, using equipment that made his voice appear to come from multiple directions simultaneously. "Tyler Moss, I presume. I have to admit, you've been more resourceful than our intelligence suggested. Stewart underestimated you significantly. Stewart made a lot of mistakes. The question is whether you're going to repeat them." Berger laughed, though Tyler could hear the strain in it. "I'm not some amateur seeking personal revenge. This is business, and business finds a way to adapt to changing circumstances. Even if you eliminate me, others will continue the operation. Your family remains a valuable asset for demonstrating our capabilities." "That's where you're wrong, Oscar. See, while you were building your little demonstration project, I was building something too. A comprehensive file documenting your entire network. Names, locations, financial structures, operational methodologies. Everything federal authorities would need to dismantle your organization completely." Tyler activated a tablet that displayed images of Berger's associates, financial records, and communication intercepts. The information was far more detailed than anything Berger had believed possible. "Impressive," Berger admitted, studying the displayed information. "But intelligence is only valuable if it reaches the right people. Kill me, and that information disappears with any hope of protecting your family long-term. You're assuming I need you alive to share that information. But here's the thing about electronic files. They can be programmed to transmit automatically under certain conditions. If I don't check in every 12 hours, everything I've compiled gets sent to every relevant federal agency simultaneously." Berger's face went pale as the implications sank in. "A dead man's switch. You're more professional than I gave you credit for. I learned from the best. 3 tours in Afghanistan, cybersecurity work with DoD, dealing with people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Sound familiar?" Tyler paused, letting Berger fully grasp his situation. "Here's what's going to happen, Oscar. You're going to provide me with additional information about your network. The details I haven't been able to compile independently. International contacts, pending operations, financial structures. Everything. And in exchange, I'll make sure the federal investigation focuses on your network's criminal activities rather than potential terrorism charges. The difference between 20 years and life in prison." Berger was quiet for several minutes, weighing his options. Tyler could see him through the surveillance camera he'd placed in the storage unit, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Finally, professional pragmatism won over personal pride. "What specific information do you want?" For the next 3 hours, Tyler systematically extracted intelligence about Berger's organization that would have taken federal authorities months to develop through traditional investigation. Names, locations, operational procedures, financial records. everything needed to dismantle a sophisticated criminal network. But Tyler's real objective was more specific, identifying and eliminating any ongoing threats to his family. Berger's information revealed that the operation against Tyler had been just one of several similar projects designed to field test new techniques. Other families in other cities were facing the same kind of psychological warfare and planned abduction that had targeted Tyler's household. How many other operations are currently active? Tyler demanded. 6. Berger replied reluctantly. Phoenix, Denver, Atlanta, Richmond, Portland, and Minneapolis. All targeting families of former military or intelligence personnel who've interfered with our clients' interests. Tyler felt sick. His family's nightmare was being replicated across the country, with other families facing the same terror he'd experienced. The thought of other children like Emma living in fear because of these criminals' experiments filled him with cold fury. Those operations end today, Tyler said. You're going to contact your field teams and abort all active projects. Every single one. Impossible. I don't have that level of authority anymore. After this morning's disaster, control has passed to our international supervisors. They're not going to abandon 6 active operations because one test subject proved more resourceful than expected. Tyler had expected this response. Berger's organization was too sophisticated to collapse because of one man's capture. But Tyler had prepared for that contingency as well. Then we'll have to convince them that continuing these operations is too dangerous to their long-term interests. Tyler activated another device, this one connected to Berger's own communication equipment. Using protocols he'd extracted from Berger's systems, Tyler began broadcasting false reports about federal law enforcement activities targeting the entire network. Raids, arrests, asset seizures, international law enforcement cooperation. All fictional, but reported through channels and in language that would be completely convincing to Berger supervisors. Within an hour, Tyler's phantom federal investigation had grown into an international crisis from the perspective of Berger's organization. Faced with what appeared to be coordinated law enforcement action across multiple countries, the criminal network began implementing emergency protocols, shutting down operations, evacuating personnel, destroying evidence. You magnificent bastard, Berger said, watching Tyler's deception unfold through his own communication channels. You're single-handedly destroying an operation that took years to build. I'm protecting families from monsters, Tyler replied coldly. The fact that it's destroying your criminal enterprise is just a bonus. As dawn gave way to morning, Tyler watched Berger's network collapse like a house of cards built on criminal sand. The false reports of federal action became self-fulfilling prophecies as the organization's panic-driven responses attracted real law enforcement attention. By noon, actual federal agencies were investigating activities they'd initially known nothing about. Tyler's gambit had worked beyond his most optimistic expectations. But now he faced a new challenge. What to do with Berger himself? The man possessed too much knowledge to simply release, but killing him in cold blood would make Tyler no better than the criminals he'd been fighting. The solution came from an unexpected source. Harvey Potter, arriving at the storage facility with several men Tyler didn't recognize. Federal marshals, Harvey explained as the men secured Berger. Turns out your phantom investigation triggered some real ones. These gentlemen have been very interested in meeting Mr. Berger for some time. As federal agents led Berger away, Tyler felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. The immediate threat to his family had been eliminated, but the cost had been higher than he'd anticipated. He'd crossed lines, made enemies, and used methods that couldn't be undone or forgotten. But Emma would sleep safely in her own bed tonight, and that made every compromise worthwhile. Chapter 6: Ghosts and Consequences. 2 weeks after Berger's arrest, Tyler sat in a secure conference room at the FBI's field office, facing 3 federal agents who were trying to reconcile their official investigation with the evidence Tyler had provided. The room was windowless and sterile, designed to make suspects uncomfortable during interrogation. But Tyler wasn't a suspect. Technically, he was a cooperative witness helping to unravel an international criminal conspiracy. Agent Kara Middleton, the lead investigator, was reviewing Tyler's statement for the third time. A veteran of organized crime investigations, she possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that missed nothing and trusted even less. "Your story is remarkably convenient, Mr. Moss," she said, not looking up from her files. "You discovered this conspiracy, infiltrated their operations, and single-handedly provided evidence that led to the arrest of 12 individuals across 6 states, all while protecting your family and staying within legal boundaries." Tyler met her skeptical gaze steadily. "I got lucky. These people underestimated civilian capabilities and made critical operational security mistakes." "Lucky?" Agent Middleton's tone suggested she found that explanation insufficient. "You extracted intelligence that would have taken our analysts months to develop, executed cyber warfare operations that required significant technical expertise, and coordinated activities across multiple jurisdictions with precision that suggests extensive planning and resources." Agent Benjamin Sloan, Middleton's partner, leaned forward. "We've been investigating Berger's network for 8 months without achieving a fraction of what you accomplished in 2 weeks. That's not luck. That's professional capability at a level that raises questions about your background and motivations." Tyler had expected this line of questioning. His cooperation with federal authorities had been necessary to eliminate the ongoing threat to his family, but it had also exposed him to official scrutiny that could complicate his future. The methods he'd used to defeat Berger's network weren't all strictly legal, and federal agents were trained to identify such discrepancies. "I have a cybersecurity background and military training," Tyler replied. "When someone threatened my family, I used every resource available to protect them. If that violated certain protocols, I accept responsibility for those decisions." Agent Middleton exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Mr. Moss, we're not here to prosecute you for protecting your family. We're here because your actions suggest capabilities that could be very valuable to ongoing federal operations." Berger's network was part of a larger criminal organization that continues to threaten American citizens. Tyler felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders. During his military service, he'd received similar recruitment pitches from intelligence agencies looking to leverage his skills for operations that existed in legal gray areas. He declined those opportunities then, choosing instead to build a normal life with his family. But his family's safety had been threatened by the same kind of criminal networks those agencies dealt with daily. The choice between normal life and necessary action had already been made for him. "What kind of cooperation are you suggesting?" Tyler asked. Agent Sloan pulled out a classified folder. Berger's organization was contracted by the Kozlov Syndicate to develop techniques for intimidating and eliminating targets in American suburban communities. Berger's arrest has disrupted their current operations, but hasn't eliminated the underlying threat. Kozlov is already working to replace Berger with someone more competent, and you wanted to help stop that. "We want you to consider a consultancy arrangement," Agent Middleton said. "Your methods were unorthodox, but they were effective. More importantly, you understand how these organizations think and operate. That perspective could be invaluable for protecting other families facing similar threats." Tyler looked out the conference room's single window, watching normal people going about their normal lives. 3 weeks ago, he'd been one of them, a suburban dad worried about nothing more serious than Emma's school grades and Megan's work schedule. Now he was being recruited to wage covert war against international criminal syndicates. "I need to discuss this with my wife," Tyler said finally. "Of course. But Mr. Moss, time is a factor. Kozlov's organization is accelerating their timeline to field test replacement operations. Other families are at risk." That evening, Tyler sat on his back porch with Megan, watching Emma play in their carefully maintained garden. The Ring doorbell that had started this nightmare now showed only normal activity: neighbors walking dogs, delivery trucks, children riding bicycles. The suburban tranquility that had once been Tyler's greatest achievement now felt fragile and temporary. "They want you to keep doing this," Megan said after Tyler explained the federal agent's proposition. "It wasn't a question. They want me to help protect other families from what we went through." Megan was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. As a pediatric nurse, She understood the weight of protecting innocents from those who would harm them. But she also understood the cost such protection extracted from those who provided it. "If you do this, you can't be the same person you were before," she said eventually. "The man who came home after dealing with Stewart and Berger. He's different from the man who installed that doorbell 3 months ago." Tyler nodded. He'd felt the change himself. A coldness that hadn't been there before, a willingness to cross lines that he'd once considered inviolable. The skills necessary to protect his family had required becoming someone harder, more dangerous, less concerned with legal niceties than with effective results. "Emma needs her father," Megan continued. "But other children need someone to protect them from the same monsters that threatened our daughter. I can't make this decision for you, Tyler. But I can tell you that whatever you choose, we'll face it together." Tyler felt a surge of love for his wife that was almost overwhelming. Another woman might have demanded that he walk away from danger, choose personal safety over public service. But Megan understood that some choices weren't really choices at all. They were moral imperatives that defined who a person truly was. The federal agents said Kozlov's organization is already working to replace Berger. "Other families are going through what we went through. Then you know what you have to do." That night, Tyler called Agent Middleton and accepted their consultancy arrangement. The work would be dangerous, morally complex, and legally ambiguous. But somewhere in America, a family was receiving mysterious signals on their home security system, and children were waking up afraid in what should have been the safety of their own homes. Tyler Moss had discovered he possessed certain talents for protecting innocents from sophisticated predators. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the life his choices had created. And given what he now knew about the threats facing ordinary families, it was a life he could live with. The suburban warrior was officially going to war. Chapter 7. The Kozlov Gambit. 6 months into his federal consultancy, Tyler had helped dismantle 3 more criminal operations and protected 14 families from organized intimidation campaigns. His methods had evolved, becoming more sophisticated as he learned to work within federal frameworks while maintaining the aggressive effectiveness that made him valuable to Agent Middleton's team. But the Kozlov organization had been learning too. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. Tyler answered on the first ring, instantly alert despite having been deep asleep moments before, a skill developed during his military service and refined through months of federal operations. "We have a problem." Agent Middleton's voice was tense. "Kozlov's people have Emma." Tyler's world stopped. For a moment, he couldn't process the words, couldn't reconcile the impossible statement with reality. Emma was safe in her bedroom upstairs. Megan had tucked her in at 9 o'clock, read her favorite story about brave princesses and dragon slayers. "That's not possible," Tyler said, but he was already moving, padding silently down the hallway to Emma's room. "She's here. She's safe. We have security measures." Emma's bed was empty. The window was open, and Tyler's sophisticated alarm system showed no signs of intrusion. Professional work, executed with precision that spoke of extensive planning and intimate knowledge of Tyler's security arrangements. "Ow!" Tyler's voice was barely controlled fury. "Viktor Kozlov himself is in the United States. He's been planning this operation personally, using intelligence gathered over the past 6 months. Tyler, they know everything about your family, your methods, your federal connections. This isn't just revenge. It's a demonstration of their capabilities to potential clients." Tyler was already moving through his house, checking Megan's location, safe at the hospital working a night shift, confirming the status of his security systems. All appeared normal except for Emma's window, and beginning mental protocol for hostage rescue operations he'd hoped never to use. Demands: you in exchange for Emma. Personal meeting, no federal backup, no surveillance. Just you and Kozlov, settling business between professionals. Tyler understood immediately. Kozlov wasn't interested in ransom money or negotiated settlements. This was about reputation, about proving that no one, not federal agents, not suburban warriors, not protective fathers, could successfully challenge the Kozlov organization. Emma was bait for a trap designed to eliminate Tyler while publicly demonstrating Kozlov's power. Location: I'm sending you coordinates. Tyler, this is obviously a trap. We can't. Agent Middleton. Tyler's voice cut through her objections with absolute finality. They have my daughter. I'm going to get her back. The only question is whether you help me or I do this entirely alone. There was silence on the line for several seconds. Then, what do you need? Tyler spent the next hour preparing for what would likely be his final operation. Unlike his previous encounters with Berger and Stewart, this wasn't a situation where superior planning and technological advantages could guarantee success. Kozlov had chosen the battlefield, set the terms of engagement, and prepared extensively for Tyler's arrival. But Tyler had advantages too. 6 months of federal work had given him access to intelligence resources and technical equipment that Kozlov might not have anticipated. More importantly, Tyler was fighting for his daughter's life, a motivation that made him more dangerous than any professional soldier or criminal operative. Harvey Potter arrived as Tyler was loading equipment into his vehicle. His old military friend took one look at Tyler's expression and nodded grimly. "What's the plan?" Harvey asked without preamble. "There is no plan. This is a straight hostage exchange in hostile territory with overwhelming odds against success. I'm going to wing it and hope training beats luck." Harvey pulled out his own weapons and gear. "Sounds like my kind of operation." "Harvey, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Emma calls me Uncle Harvey, and uncles don't let little girls stay with monsters just because the odds are bad." The coordinates led to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, the kind of isolated location that provided multiple escape routes for hostiles while offering no cover or concealment for rescue attempts. Tyler and Harvey spent 30 minutes conducting surveillance from a distance, identifying at least 12 armed guards positioned around the perimeter. Professional setup, Harvey observed through binoculars. Military-trained personnel, overlapping fields of fire, sophisticated communications equipment. Kozlov's not taking any chances. Tyler studied the facility's layout, looking for weaknesses in what appeared to be an impregnable defensive position. Emma's probably being held in the central building, maximum distance from potential rescue approach routes. Kozlov will want to keep her close during negotiations to maintain psychological leverage. Negotiations? I don't think Kozlov intends to negotiate. This is an execution designed to look like a hostage exchange gone wrong. He gets to eliminate me while demonstrating his organization's capabilities to potential clients. Emma becomes collateral damage that reinforces his reputation for ruthlessness. Harvey nodded grimly. "So we don't negotiate. We go in hard and fast, eliminate hostiles, extract Emma, and sort out the legal complications later." Tyler appreciated his friend's loyalty, but the tactical situation was nearly hopeless. 12 professional guards in fortified positions against 2 attackers with limited ammunition and no backup. Even with their military training and superior motivation, the odds were overwhelming. But Tyler had spent 6 months learning that sometimes overwhelming odds could be overcome through unconventional methods and willingness to escalate beyond an enemy's expectations. "I have an idea," Tyler said, pulling out his phone. "But it's going to require federal resources and some very flexible interpretation of jurisdictional authority." Agent Middleton answered on the first ring. "Tyler, where are you?" "Close enough to see the target location. I need you to coordinate with local SWAT teams and prepare for a major federal operation. Multiple suspects, automatic weapons, possible explosives." "Tyler, we can't authorize a federal assault based on—" "Agent Middleton," Tyler interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had moved beyond caring about official protocols. "Viktor Kozlov is on American soil with a team of armed foreign nationals who have kidnapped an American child. This is officially an act of international terrorism, which gives you all the jurisdictional authority you need." Tyler could hear Agent Middleton consulting with her superiors in the background. Federal bureaucracy was notoriously slow, but the combination of international terrorism and child endangerment could accelerate decision-making processes dramatically. "How much time do you need?" she asked finally. Tyler checked his watch. Dawn was still 2 hours away. Optimal timing for a coordinated assault. 2 hours. And Agent Middleton? When this starts, it's going to get very loud and very messy. Make sure your people are ready for that. As Tyler and Harvey prepared for what might be their final mission together, Tyler felt the familiar calm that preceded combat operations. Emma was depending on him, and Tyler Moss had never failed anyone who depended on him. Viktor Kozlov was about to learn why that perfect record was going to continue. Chapter 8, The Final Gambit. At exactly 4:30 a.m., Tyler walked alone toward the industrial complex's main entrance, his hands visible and empty as per Kozlov's instructions. Every step was monitored by hidden federal snipers positioned throughout the surrounding area, while Harvey coordinated tactical teams from a mobile command center half a mile away. But Tyler knew the real battle would be fought with psychology rather than bullets. Kozlov was too experienced to allow a simple tactical solution to succeed. He would have anticipated federal involvement and prepared countermeasures. Tyler's only advantage was that Kozlov expected him to be a desperate father making emotional decisions rather than a professional operator executing a carefully planned deception. The main building's entrance was flanked by 2 guards who searched Tyler thoroughly before escorting him inside. The industrial space had been converted into a sophisticated temporary command center, with surveillance equipment monitoring approaches to the facility and communication systems connecting to Kozlov's international network. Viktor Kozlov stood in the center of the space like a spider in his web, a tall, lean man in his 50s whose pale eyes held the kind of casual cruelty that came from decades of inflicting suffering without consequence. Emma sat in a chair beside him, her hands zip-tied and her face streaked with tears, but otherwise unharmed. "Mr. Tyler Moss," Kozlov said in accented English, "your reputation precedes you. My associates speak of you with considerable respect, though not necessarily affection." Tyler's eyes never left Emma, who was trying to be brave, but was clearly terrified. "Let her go, Kozlov. Your business is with me. Actually, my business is with the federal authorities who have been interfering with legitimate commercial activities. You're simply a convenient focal point for resolving certain jurisdictional disputes." Kozlov gestured to monitors showing surveillance feeds from around the facility. "I am aware that your friends are positioned outside. Federal agents, local SWAT teams, probably military snipers as well." Very impressive response to a simple business meeting. Tyler wasn't surprised that Kozlov had detected the federal presence, but the criminal leader's confidence suggested he had additional resources Tyler hadn't anticipated, resources that might make the planned assault more costly than acceptable. "Here is what will happen," Kozlov continued. "You will contact Agent Middleton and order the withdrawal of all federal personnel. In exchange, I will allow your daughter to leave safely. You, however, will remain to discuss certain operational adjustments to federal policy regarding my organization. And if I refuse?" Kozlov pulled out a tablet showing video feeds from multiple locations around the city. Tyler's blood ran cold as he recognized several of them: Megan's hospital, Harvey's apartment building, Agent Middleton's home address. Refusal would have consequences extending well beyond this facility, Kozlov said calmly. "I have invested considerable resources in developing comprehensive intelligence about everyone connected to your federal operations. Your daughter is not my only leverage, merely the most emotionally compelling." Tyler felt the familiar cold fury building in his chest, but his voice remained steady. "You made a mistake coming here personally, Kozlov. Whatever happens to my family, you won't live to enjoy it." Kozlov laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Mr. Moss, I have survived 3 decades in a business where mistakes are typically fatal. Do you really believe a suburban father with military training poses a greater threat than the Russian mafia, Chechen separatists, or Colombian cartels? Those organizations had to worry about politics, territories, and profit margins," Tyler replied. "I just have to worry about my family. That makes me much more dangerous than anyone you've faced before." Tyler activated a small device concealed in his watch. Not a weapon or communication device, but a simple timer that had been counting down since he entered the building. Kozlov's confidence was about to be shattered by realities he hadn't considered. The first explosion came from the facility's power infrastructure, plunging the building into darkness while simultaneously disabling Kozlov's surveillance and communication systems. Tyler had spent hours studying the complex's electrical layout, identifying critical points where shaped charges could create maximum disruption with minimal risk to hostages. In the chaos that followed, Tyler's military training took over. Years of night operations had prepared him for exactly this kind of combat environment, moving through darkness while hostile forces struggled to adapt to changed circumstances. Emma's chair was exactly where Tyler had calculated it would be, and his daughter followed his whispered instructions perfectly, staying low, moving when he moved, trusting her father completely even in the midst of nightmare chaos. But Kozlov's men were professionals too, and they recovered from the initial surprise quickly. Automatic weapons fire filled the darkness as they attempted to eliminate Tyler while recapturing Emma. Tyler returned fire with surgical precision, each shot carefully aimed to avoid ricocheted dangers in the confined space. The second explosion came from outside the building. Harvey signaled that federal tactical teams were beginning their assault on the facility's perimeter. Kozlov had prepared for a negotiated settlement or a straight hostage exchange, but not for a coordinated deception operation that used multiple phases of escalation to overwhelm his defenses. As federal agents stormed the building, Tyler found himself in the kind of close-quarters combat he'd hoped never to experience on American soil. Kozlov's guards were fighting with the desperation of men who knew capture meant life imprisonment or worse, while Tyler fought with the focused intensity of a father protecting his child. The final confrontation came in the building's central corridor, where Kozlov himself waited with a pistol aimed at the space Tyler would have to cross to reach the exit with Emma. Even in the emergency lighting from federal tactical units, Tyler could see the criminal leader's expression of cold calculation. An impressive operation, Mr. Moss, but ultimately futile. Your daughter lives only as long as I find her useful as leverage against federal operations. Kill me, and she becomes a liability to be eliminated. Tyler stepped into the corridor, shielding Emma with his body. You're forgetting something, Kozlov. What? Tyler smiled grimly. I spent 6 months learning everything about your organization. Financial structures, operational procedures, personnel files, everything. And unlike your operation against my family, my intelligence gathering included comprehensive contingency planning. Tyler activated his phone, showing Kozlov a list of names, addresses, and photographs. Every member of your organization currently in the United States. Their locations, their activities, their connections to international criminal networks. All documented, all ready for transmission to federal authorities. Kozlov's eyes widened as he recognized the scope of Tyler's intelligence operation. Impossible. That information is compartmentalized, encrypted. Your people underestimated civilian cyber warfare capabilities. Again, Tyler's voice carried absolute conviction. Kill my daughter, and your entire American operation gets rolled up within 24 hours. Let her go, and you get to disappear back to whatever hole you crawled out of. For several seconds, Kozlov weighed his options while automatic weapons fire echoed from other parts of the building. His men were losing, federal tactical teams were establishing control, and his carefully planned demonstration of power was collapsing into a public relations disaster. Finally, professional pragmatism overcame personal pride. Kozlov lowered his weapon and stepped aside, allowing Tyler and Emma to pass toward the exit where federal agents waited to escort them to safety. This isn't over, Moss, Kozlov called after them. My organization has a long memory for those who interfere with our business. Tyler paused at the exit, still holding Emma protectively against his side. Actually, it is over. Because unlike your previous enemies, I don't have territories to defend or profits to protect. I just have a family to keep safe. And that means you and everyone like you stay as far away from us as possible. Tyler looked directly into Kozlov's eyes, letting the criminal leader see the absolute conviction there. Test that theory at your own risk. As federal agents led Kozlov away in handcuffs, Tyler finally allowed himself to breathe normally. Emma was safe, the immediate threat was eliminated, and his family could begin the process of returning to normal life. But Tyler knew that normalcy was a relative concept. He'd changed during this ordeal, become someone harder and more dangerous than the suburban father who'd installed a Ring doorbell 6 months earlier. The question now was whether that change would ultimately protect his family or destroy the peaceful life he'd fought so hard to preserve. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 3 months after Viktor Kozlov's arrest, Tyler sat in his home office reviewing the final reports from federal prosecutors. The Kozlov organization had been dismantled completely. 27 arrests across 6 countries, financial assets seized, and operational capabilities eliminated. Emma was sleeping peacefully in her own bed, and Megan had returned to her normal work schedule at the hospital. By all external measures, the Moss family had returned to suburban normalcy. But Tyler knew the deeper truth was more complicated. Emma was describing her school's safety protocols with a detailed knowledge of someone who understood that dangers existed beyond childish imagination. Megan was discussing her volunteer work with families who'd experienced trauma, using terminology that reflected hard-won understanding of psychological warfare's effects. And Tyler found himself analyzing their daily routines for security vulnerabilities even during casual family discussion. "Dad," Emma said as Megan cleared the dinner dishes, "are the bad people going to come back?" Tyler looked into his daughter's eyes, still innocent despite everything she'd experienced, still trusting despite having every reason for permanent fear. This was the question that haunted his nights and drove his continued preparation for threats that might never materialize. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise that if they do, we'll be ready for them." Emma nodded solemnly. "Because we're stronger than we were before." Tyler felt his heart break and swell simultaneously. His 8-year-old daughter had learned lessons about strength and survival that most adults never faced, but she'd learned them without losing her essential humanity. Perhaps that was the real victory. Not the elimination of specific threats, but the preservation of family bonds strong enough to survive any challenge. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and Megan had gone to bed early after her volunteer shift, Tyler walked through his house, checking security systems and reviewing surveillance feeds. The routines that had once been paranoid preparation were now simply practical maintenance of the life he'd built for his family. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Impressive work with Kozlov. Others are watching. Others are learning. Sleep well, Suburban Warrior." Tyler deleted the message and added the number to his monitoring systems. Somewhere in the darkness, new enemies were studying his methods and planning their own operations. The war for his family's safety would never truly end. It would just evolve into new forms requiring new responses. But Tyler had evolved too. The suburban father who'd installed a Ring doorbell to catch package thieves was gone, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous, and infinitely more protective of everything that mattered. Tyler Moss checked the locks one final time, armed the security systems, and headed upstairs to his family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to prove that some lines should never be crossed. And Tyler would be ready for whatever came next. In Emma's bedroom, he paused to watch his daughter, sleeping peacefully, her face relaxed in the kind of trust that children should be able to take for granted. She'd grown stronger through their ordeal, but she'd retained her essential innocence, proof that some victories were worth any cost. Tyler smiled as he closed Emma's door. Let new enemies study his methods and plan their operations. They would find him ready, willing, and more dangerous than anyone who threatened his family could possibly imagine. The Ring doorbell might have started this nightmare, but Tyler Moss had ended it on his own terms. And those terms would apply to any future threats foolish enough to test his resolve. The Suburban Warrior was home, and his family was safe. Everything else was just details waiting to be resolved. Emma now woke up sometimes at night, not from doorbell chimes, but from dreams she couldn't quite remember. She developed a habit of checking locks and security cameras before going to bed, behaviors that broke Tyler's heart even as he recognized their practicality. The innocence that had been stolen from his daughter could never be fully recovered. Megan had thrown herself into her work with an intensity that spoke of her own processing of trauma. She'd started volunteering with organizations that helped children who'd experienced violence, channeling her protective instincts into professional service. But Tyler sometimes caught her watching Emma with an expression of fierce vigilance that hadn't been there before their ordeal. And Tyler himself had discovered that some transformations were permanent. The federal consultancy had officially ended with Kozlov's conviction, but Agent Middleton continued to call occasionally with intelligence about emerging threats to civilian families. Tyler found himself unable to ignore those calls, unable to return to a purely personal existence, when he knew monsters were still hunting innocents. The Ring doorbell had been replaced with a more sophisticated security system, but Tyler often found himself checking its feeds with the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned that safety was an illusion maintained through constant preparation. That morning, Harvey Potter arrived for their weekly coffee meeting, a tradition they'd established to help each other process their experiences and maintain their friendship despite the violence they'd shared. "Any word from our federal friends?" Harvey asked, settling into his usual chair on Tyler's back porch. Agent Middleton called yesterday. They're tracking indications that Kozlov's arrest created a power vacuum that's attracting attention from other criminal organizations. Nothing direct, but she wanted me aware of potential developments. Harvey nodded. Both men understood that Tyler's success against sophisticated criminal networks had created a reputation that would attract both admiration and hostility from similar organizations. The price of protecting his family might be a lifetime of vigilance against those who saw him as either a threat or a challenge. "Emma seems to be doing better," Harvey observed, watching Tyler's daughter play in the backyard with the kind of carefree energy that had been missing for months. "She is, but she's different now. More aware, more careful. Sometimes I wonder if we saved her childhood or just extended it temporarily." "You save her life, Tyler. Everything else is details we can work through together." Tyler appreciated his friend's perspective, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their victory had come at costs they were still discovering. The methods he'd used to defeat Stewart, Berger, and Kozlov had required crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. He'd become someone capable of violence and deception at levels that would have horrified the man he'd been before this started. That afternoon, Agent Middleton called with news that crystallized Tyler's concerns about the future. "We've received intelligence indicating that your success against the Kozlov organization has attracted attention from several other criminal networks," she reported. "Nothing immediate, but they're studying your methods and developing countermeasures. Some are also exploring whether your family might represent valuable leverage for operations against federal law enforcement." Tyler felt the familiar cold fury building. "Are you telling me this is going to happen again?" "I'm telling you that your actions have consequences beyond the specific threats you eliminated. You've become a symbol of civilian resistance to organized crime, which makes you both an inspiration and a target." Tyler understood. His choice to fight back against criminals targeting his family had made him a public figure in circles where such attention was extremely dangerous. Other